Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, your home for movie news, reviews, and movie fan views. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, joined, as always, by my co-host, Rob Dunham.
How's it going, everyone?
It's good to be back talking about movies for another week. Yes, we've got a packed show. In fact, we are going to get into some big stuff. We'll start off with a little box office update. Then we will head straight into our full review of The Batman, followed by our world famous, always anticipated, never duplicated top movies of 2021.
Yeah, no one else does that. No one.
Nobody does this. This is unique to our podcast.
There's not even like an award show or anything. I think they would get on that.
I know. You think somebody else would pick up on this idea.
Yeah.
However, I will say that our list will be better.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
I mean, considering that you probably will not have heard of 90% of the movies on the actual year-end award list. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the I mean, let's be honest, this is a people's / populist movie podcast. As much as we like to talk about the thought behind movies and some of the implications when it comes to messaging and all that, we also do like popular movies. So sue us, I guess.
Yeah. This is I would like to think that we occupy the space that can both elevate movies and still remain in the popular culture with it.
Yeah.
That we've not gone so far down the rabbit hole that we cannot appreciate good fan.
It's not necessarily something wrong with movies that make the most money.
Correct.
There's a reason why they make money.
Yeah. And there's a reason why people want to go see them. And there's a reason why people don't want to go see the other ones. It is. But we'll get into some of that as we go along. We'll also do our watch list. All right, Rob, let's get into a little bit of the box office numbers. So this week, The Batman, once again, in its second week in the box office, was number one by far, taking home $66.5 million. So now this is the point of the podcast where I brag about being more right than you.
Yes. I don't remember the exact numbers. So
I have the exact numbers because I wrote them down last week. Okay. We predicted last week what the second weekend at the box office would look like for The Batman. Rob came in at 47.5 million and I came in at 70 million. So I was a little high, but I was much closer than Rob.
And I think the one article we saw estimated like 68. So it was pretty close. Yeah, it was
pretty close. I was pleased, and I think that shows some of the staying power that you did not have as much of a drop off as we've seen in some of the other releases, especially bigger releases since the pandemic. That the drop off was not as stark for the Batman as it has been for other movies. Number two, Uncharted, 9.3 million. And new entrants onto the box office at number three, BTS Permission to Dance on Stage, Seoul live viewing. That one was a surprise entrance. I did not see that one coming, but apparently people wanted to go see it. So 6.8 million for that one in its first week. Dog made 5.2 million. Spider-Man No Way Home came in fifth at 4.1. So Rob, anything that sticks out to you from the box office?
I mean, Spider-Man No Way Home is still on the box office list, and it's also on the 2021 movie list.
Yes.
Which I think that's all you need to know about Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah. This movie's been in the box office for over 3 months now.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, and it's still rocking the top 5. So that's very, very impressive, and it might still be in box office by the time you can purchase this movie. So it's quite the run for Spider-Man. That's for sure. It's amazing what that film has done. Okay, well let's move on. Opening this week, we have a variety of releases, and this is one of those weeks where you just kind of dump a bunch of indie movies out there that are interesting in and of their own variety. So the first one is that's coming out this week is Jujutsu Kaisen Zero, the movie. So this is another animated feature, or not anime, not animated, anime. That's the appropriate term. This is another anime movie, and this just continues the trend we're seeing of more and more animated Man, I can't keep this straight. Anime films having major box office releases and being carried in more and more theaters. So we're seeing the rise of anime continue. So that is that film. The next we have the movie X. This one is a horror film starring Mia Goth, Jenna Ortega, Brittany Snow would be a more known name. And this film is in 1979, a group of young filmmakers set out to make an adult film in rural Texas. But when their reclusive elderly host catches them in the act, the cast finds themselves fighting for their lives. So we have that one. And the next one we have is The Outfit. And now this one seems interesting. This one has Mark Rylance, known for his Oscar-winning role in Bridge of Spies, Zoe Deutsch, Dylan O'Brien, and this one is an expert tailor must outwit a dangerous group of mobsters in order to survive a fateful night. So that's The Outfit. And lastly, we have Uma. And this is a movie starring Sandra Oh and Dermot Mulroney. And this is Amanda and her daughter live a quiet life on an American farm, but when the remains of her estranged mother arrive from Korea, Amanda becomes haunted by the fear of turning into her own mother. Interesting. So this is another horror entrant. So we have a couple of horror movies. We have a drama and we have an anime movie. So Rob, what do you make of this week's entrance into the box office? And do you have a favorite?
I think that out of those four, Uma is the one I'd be most interested in going to see. Possibly X as well, but that would be a little bit lower. I believe X is an A24.
Yes, that is an A24 release. Yeah,
and I'm a big fan of A24, so it's possible I might end up seeing that. But I wouldn't say either of them are super high on my list of like dying to go out and watch.
Yeah, I get that. For me, it's The Outfit. I really liked some of the performances Mark Rylance has given. He was excellent in, like I said, The Bridge of Spies. He also had a really good role in Dunkirk as well, and some other films. So I really enjoy that. And I saw a trailer for this one, and I was intrigued. I think there's definitely some potential in The Outfit. So for me, that would be the one from this week that I would lean towards. Of course, there's still a couple other ones in the box office I haven't seen, haven't gotten to, so I don't know if I'll get to it, but The Outfit is definitely the one that I would go for. All right. Well, that is a wrap up of our box office review and preview for the week. Make sure you go out and see some of these films. There's still a lot of good movies out in theaters and a lot of different varieties. So there's something for everybody out there. Make sure you check that out. And we'll move straight on to our discussion topics. And first and foremost, as we promised last week, we will get into a full breakdown of The Batman. So we'll do like we normally do. We'll start out with some brief highlights that don't include spoilers, just to give you a taste of what we're going to get into. And then we'll get into the full breakdown, spoilers included. We'll give you a heads up when that's coming. All right, Rob, initial thoughts on The Batman.
I think I shared this briefly last week when we talked after I'd seen the movie, but my first overarching initial thought on the movie was just that the tone is incredibly dark.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just it seems like Batman movies just keep getting darker and darker.
Yes.
I didn't think it was too much, but it was certainly not the Christopher Nolan movies.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not the movies before that.
Yes.
That were lighthearted. So that's my first initial thought. My other initial thought is I think Robert Pattinson did a good job as Batman, and this is going to sound. I don't want to sound mean.
Yeah.
But like, he almost was not necessary.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I
almost feel like it could have been any number of people playing Batman, and it wouldn't have made much of a difference. And I feel personally that was not the case with the Christopher Nolan ones. I think Christian Bale did something to the Batman character.
Yeah.
That people have not done before him.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not get the same feeling watching Robert Pattinson.
Yeah. 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 For me, my initial thoughts are, yes, I agree with you that the movie has a very dark tenor. It's not quite as dark as the Joker, in my estimation. I didn't walk out of the film saying, "Oh my goodness!" Like, I need to contemplate whether that movie should exist.
Yeah.
Like I did with the Joker.
Yeah.
So it's not quite at that level, but it is stark and it is dark the whole way through. Length is another key thing that sticks out in this movie. It was very, very long, needlessly, in my opinion, but we can get into that later. And I agree with you. One of the things that sticks out about this is Batman almost as a sideshow in the movie. Like, for a movie where you're introducing a new Batman has remarkably little to do in the film and has a remarkably little impact on the film. And I think that is not a product of Robert Pattinson. I think that is a product of the writing and directing. I think Robert Pattinson was fine. But yeah, I think the role of Batman is something that we'll get into, as it was a little questionable in this film. I think the villain, especially towards the second half of the film, was excellent. And I did enjoy the overall feel of the settings, but we can get into that more too. Anything else before we get into the specific breakdowns?
That seems pretty good, broad stroke wise.
All right. So this is your spoiler warning. We will now talk specifically about things that actually happened in the movie. So if you have not seen The Batman, you will want to skip ahead. You can look in the message notes and it will tell you when the next section starts that you can skip over. You have now been warned. Spoilers. All right, Rob, let's get into it. All right. How do we want to start? You want to start out with things you liked about the movie? Do we want to get into some of the things we don't like? Where do you want to start?
Maybe a mixture of both for me.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
I think so. You said that you liked the Riddler character, Paul Dano, and I agree with you 100%. I think he was an excellent villain, but I was also frustrated, and I find it interesting that you said there's very little for Batman to do, but at the same time, I felt like there was more focus on Selina Kyle than there was on the Riddler, and I thought the Riddler was the better character by a lot, the more dynamic character, the more interesting.
Yes.
I wish they had spent more time on his story and explaining some of his motivations a little bit more, because I found his character intriguing, and I found how Paul Dano played him impressive.
Yeah, you get lines of exposition about his motivations and where he came from towards the end of the movie. You get almost no development, which is much more characteristic of the Joker than it is of Riddler. The Joker's this guy who you don't know where he is and what he's coming from and what his motivation is. It's almost like they took most of the characteristics of the Joker and played the Riddler that way, which I know the Joker is a huge character, but they could have done more. And I think you're right. I think you could argue that Selina Kyle is the focus of this movie, with the amount of screen time and the amount of things they gave her to do as opposed to Batman, which I don't think was to the film's benefit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there was too much focus on the family drama angle, just between her and between Batman and the mob bosses and his family. Like,
Yeah.
it was an interesting way to tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we both agree they could have focused on other things, and it would have made for a better movie overall.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did you make of the actual character of Batman in this film? Just a couple things from me. Like, this was clearly detective Batman as opposed to crime fighting Batman, city savior Batman. Like, this was detective Batman, which is fine in and of itself. But I was shocked at the little amount that they really gave him to do. It's a lot of him wandering around,
Yeah,
and participating in things, but not doing a whole lot. I was really shocked. I thought they really undersold the Batman and really didn't give a lot of time to it.
well, the Detective Batman, except for the one scene where he beat up an entire gang of people.
Yes.
I guess. I What I took from that is, and they set this up with the scene right before that with the bat signal, that it showed that maybe it was at a point where he didn't have to do a whole lot because people are just scared of knowing he's a possibility. That's kind of how they set that up. So the timeline is interesting too, because you're placing it essentially it's not the same Batman as Christian Bale's Batman, but it's after the stuff that happens with Christian Bale, I think, for the most part, because Maroni's been busted in this movie. Batman's an established presence. People are afraid of him. So this was not like a Batman origin story, because the movie started essentially in a place where Batman was already well known by everyone, and they were scared of him.
See, and there's a little bit of mixed motivation in there too, because he says, oh, by the way, they do set up that thing where people are scared of Batman. At the same time, he's like, is anything I'm doing working? At the beginning of the film, he's like, maybe nothing I'm doing is working. So you have this thing where everyone's sort of scared of Batman, but also it's not really making a difference. So you can't really have both those two things. And they're trying to hold both of those things in tension. And I don't know that it works super well to set up the stage.
Yeah, I guess it's that they're trying. I guess the reason why they did that is they're trying to set up like an origin for this Batman.
Yeah.
And in order to have an origin for Batman, you need to have a conflict. And I think it's with Batman, it's an internal conflict because of what's happened with his family in the past, and crime being a main part of what happened to his family in the past. I really like, this is the Christopher Nolan fan podcast, but I like the time they took and the effort they took to show like where he was, where he went, how he became who he was.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that at all with this movie. This movie was just like, here's Batman.
Yeah.
You know who he is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I made that comment that it didn't necessarily matter that Robert Pattinson was Batman, because there was no development of that character. It's just like, you know who this is. So you understand what he's about. And I mean, at this point, most people do.
Yeah.
So one of my internal questions as I was watching this movie and after watching it, are we at, and this is like a very broad question, but are we at the point where, since there's so much known about Batman, there's been so many versions of Batman, is there anything new to say about Batman?
It's tough, because I think this is one of the challenges of constantly rebooting a known character. is how do you make it different? How do you differentiate from the previous versions, especially when you have Batman that was so well done with Christopher Nolan, and that those films loom so large over the character. I think sometimes we go out of the way to do something different and it doesn't work. I think the motivations and the character of Batman is much more muddled in this film, as opposed to the clear lines drawn and the clear differentiation and the clarity around purpose and ideas and existence of Batman and what his role is so clear in the Christopher Nolan films. And I think it lacks in the Batman. And I think that's partially due to them. I don't think they really didn't treat it with the seriousness that the Batman character is. And I mean, this is part of the impact. It's like they've spent so much time on Catwoman that I think that more of that time could have been spent on the Batman. What did you make of the length? We'll talk about that. What did you think about the length of the film?
So I didn't necessarily have a problem with the length by itself, but my issue with the length is everything that we talked about.
Yeah.
Like, it was this long. Why didn't they do some of these things that they could have done, and why did they choose to do the things they did instead?
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably not an issue for me of the length. The issue is more the editing, how they chose to tell this story, I guess.
Yeah, for me, the length is an issue for several reasons. One, if I find myself checking my watch to see how far we're into a movie, which I did several times while watching this, that's not a good sign as to the pacing of the film. You and I have both seen this. I mean, I thought this with when I watched Bond. I thought this when I watched Dune. Like, these are long films that don't feel long.
Right.
This was a long film that felt long.
Yeah.
And that speaks to something. I mean, for me, it used to be the 2-hour rule. Like, if you're going to break 2 hours, you need to have a very good reason for doing so. That's changed a little bit. I would say it's more moved to about 2.5 hours. If you're going to be greater than 2.5 hours, you better have a darn good reason why you're going over 2.5 hours. And I didn't think this one did. I don't think it was necessary that they went as long as they did, especially with then we still come out of this film feeling like we lack things, like we lack knowledge of the Batman. We lack knowledge about the Riddler. And how do you spend 3 hours in a movie where you lack knowledge about two of the three most important characters in the film? So I think there was definitely, and I think this has a lot to do with editing. I agree with you on that one. I think this was a lot of it was due to editing. And it was like, hey, we want to make something. It's like, hey, if we make it long, then people will think it's epic. But what I think results in this is it makes it a much less accessible film. You're going to be much less likely to watch this on recurring times because of how long it is and because of how drawn out it is. You're going to be less likely to engage with it in the future as a result of that. And I think that's something that while not important to your initial viewing of it, is important to where the film will fit in the scope of the Batman franchise in terms of its longevity and its place in the canon.
So it seems pretty obvious that there will be another movie. I mean, based on how it's done so far and the fact. What did you feel about the Joker reveal in prison?
Yeah. Again, I think for me, my initial reaction is kind of similar to how I felt about a lot of the DC entrants. It's like, are we going to get any consistency from here? Like, are we going to get, is this Joker character going to be in any way tied to the film The Joker? If not, then what are we doing? If it is, how's that going to work? How's that going to fit? Because they kind of told slightly different storylines in terms of, because the Joker even had a reveal about the death of Bruce Wayne's parents that was different than what you saw in the Batman.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? And if it's not the same thing with the Joker, then what was the point of the Joker other than here's a movie?
Yeah.
So that's my main question coming out of that is what are we doing in terms of creating some sort of consistency, or are we just going to constantly reboot all the characters every couple of years?
Yeah, I think they're trying to create alternate timelines. So when you do that, like right in quick succession, it's just confusing.
Yeah.
It's the difference between that and what they did with Spider-Man is night and day. Because Spider-Man, there were 3 different Spider peoples because they all had their own stories.
Yeah.
And it made sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me what they're trying to do, and I think the Joker by itself as a standalone movie is maybe the best one they've done, but also is that really like did that movie have to be about the character of the Joker, or could it just have been like a disaffected person? Like, did it have to even be the Joker?
Yeah, if you're not going to tie it into the larger world, the larger framework, then it I think hurts the overall longevity and appeal of that film as well. I think, and this is where, like, one thing that I will give Marvel wins when it comes to creating a universe and creating clarity around the story and the arc and where everything's going across multiple films. Marvel absolutely wins on that. DC seems like they're trying to elevate the film, each of the films, and trying to take that to a higher level of filmmaking. And that's more difficult. It's ambitious. And I think on some aspects they succeed. I think, and you can make the case that individually, a lot of these are better films than a lot of your Marvel movies, but they lack a cohesiveness, and they lack a clarity, and they lack a vision across time that Marvel has succeeded on. So while the individual Marvel movies may be less in terms of stylistic cinema, they win on clarity.
Yeah. I think that the cinematography in this movie was fantastic.
Oh, it was so good.
But yeah, going back to the character of the Riddler, like, to me it just seemed like there was short shrift placed on the motivation of the character, because when you got to the climax scene in prison where Bruce Wayne is talking to him, and he said, "Oh, you're not as smart as I thought you were." Like, to me, there weren't any clues earlier in the movie that would make that moment be like, "Oh, I totally get like what he was trying to say and do."
Yeah.
It was like they revealed everything in that moment instead of actually building to it. And if they built to it, it would have been a way more powerful moment, I felt like.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing you got was that he was leaving letters for the Batman the whole way through. And this brings me to actually one of the specific points that I really, really didn't like. The Riddler, as he's killing people, every single one of the times he's attempting to kill these corrupt people, he does it personally. He shows up in the police chief's mansion and kills him directly. He shows up in that guy's car and directly puts a bomb onto him. Then we get around to where he's supposedly going to kill Bruce Wayne. He mails him a bomb. Like, it's a completely different MO that's not remotely connected to his character. And I mean, you obviously have to know that a billionaire is not opening his own mail and sorting through his own mail. Like, it was just completely out of character. And it's one of those things where, okay, we're doing this so that we don't have to have a scene where he's attempting to kill him this early, and where it can provide, we get messed up. You mess up Alfred will provide more motivation for Batman. Like, it was just clear that it didn't fit the character, and they were just doing it for the story elements. So that really bothered me, that was not fitting with the Riddler character and he'd been doing the whole time.
Yeah, I think overall, I think it's fair to say we would probably both say maybe this can be a final statement on it, because I don't think it's necessary to talk super long about it, but I think we both, there were aspects of this movie that made both of us want it to be better than it was.
Yeah. And I think I will say this, it got off to such a good start for me, because I loved that opening monologue. It was very Sin City like, and you're getting that great film noir cinematography, the 80s, like the gritty 80s New York City feel, and that monologue over top. So like, okay, we're off to a good start, but you're right. There's just a lot that left us to be desired, a lot left on the table. Okay. All right. So let's move on, and we will talk about our top films. Okay. Let's get rolling. Our top films for 2021. So we promised we'd do this. This is the Film for Fans. And how we'll do this is each of us will give our personal list, and then on the filmforfans.com, we'll do like a combined list that kind of ranks our things. And those will be like the official Film for Fans recommendations for top movies of 2021. So Rob, let's get started with, we'll do it reverse order. So let's talk about our honorable mentions.
Okay.
Films that didn't quite make the cut.
So I think I have 2 honorable mentions. Both did superbly well in the box office. Both were very big movies. I enjoyed both of them immensely. They just didn't quite make my top 10, and one or both of them may have made yours. I don't know. But they are Jungle Cruise and Black Widow.
Okay.
I thought they were both really well done. I think they're worthy of being included, at least in honorable mention sense, in a list at the end of the year. I don't think either of them were mailed in or lazy. I was impressed with Black Widow, and also impressed with Jungle Cruise, the performances, the cinematography, just the stories in both too, I thought were well executed. Jungle Cruise, especially being about a theme park ride. I mean, you've seen this with Pirates of the Caribbean, so it's not a surprise that they're able to do it, but I was impressed by how they handled that, and I thought it was a solid movie. So honorable mentions, Black Widow and Jungle Cruise for me.
Okay. Yeah, actually neither one of them made my list. So my honorable mentions include, I've got 5 of them, include A Quiet Place Part 2, which was quite a good movie, especially for a sequel to a horror movie. So I enjoyed it, but not quite on the list. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I thought it was fine, but that's it. The Tragedy of Macbeth, which was a Apple TV Plus release, which I really, really enjoyed. Old, the latest from M. Night Shyamalan. It's a quality film. And Ghostbusters Afterlife. It was a solid film, and I thought it really, really achieved a lot, considering the legacy that it had to do and having to overcome the failure of the previous Ghostbuster film, but didn't quite make the list. So those are
I don't think the previous Ghostbusters film has joined Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for me in movies that don't exist. So
yeah. For sure. Okay. All right. So that's our honorable mentions list. So let's do this. We'll do our list 10 through 6. So we'll each go back and forth on our list of 10 through 6 and talk about those a little bit more in detail.
So am I listing all my 10 through 6 in a row here?
Yes, you can list all of them and then talk about them as you see fit.
Okay. So my number 10 was Candyman.
Okay.
And number 10 also interesting thing about Candyman, and I think the reason why it is included in my top 10 list, there's more to it than just I liked the movie, although I liked the movie. My good friend Jen and I have been going to see some scary movies because my wife doesn't like them and her husband doesn't like them. And I've liked scary movies for a long time, but never had anybody to actually watch them with. And so there is some kind of emotional impact on this, picking this as number 10, because it represented something to me this year that I have not had for a while. But I really enjoyed the story. I really like the overall stories by Stephen King. I like this movie. I thought there were some very interesting scenes in this movie. How it was shot, one in particular that I mentioned when I first saw it. There was a fight in the bathroom and there was a compact mirror on the floor, and they focused in on the mirror, and the mirror showed the fight, which was really, like, I just thought that was really cool. And I was impressed by it because it was a higher quality kind of idea than I've seen in some other horror movies. Interestingly enough, number 9 is also kind of a horror movie, but a little different because it's more psychological horror than it was straight up like violence or gore. There's some in it. Was Last Night in Soho with Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy. This was directed by Edgar Wright, who I love. Obviously a part of the trilogy with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost as the director there, Baby Driver among others, and he's probably one of my favorite directors, and I think he did a fantastic job with this movie as well. And it tells a story about a girl in the present and a girl in the past, and their lives coming together, and you figure out what's going to happen at the end. And I just think it was really well executed. Number 8 on my list was Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds. I just enjoyed the heck out of this movie. I actually just watched it again last week, and it is hilarious. It is really, I think it does a fantastic job at being incredibly referential to video games, but also accessible enough for people who don't play video games to find it funny, which is a hard line to draw. And I really like Taika Waititi's character in this movie. He's an absolute over-the-top megalomaniac, and it's great. Number 7, I have Mitchell's versus the Machines from Netflix, which is my only animated movie on the list. And I think it was the best animated movie of the year. Sorry, Encanto fans. But it had heart, had a really good story, was funny. I was very surprised by this movie and enjoyed it a lot. That's why it's number 7. Number 6 for me is the previously mentioned Spider-Man No Way Home. I could argue that it could be higher on this list for sure. But for me, there were just some that I liked more. But I love what they did with the storyline in this movie. I love how secretive it was going into it, how we had all this tension, how they didn't reveal things, they didn't ruin things ahead of time. I love how Andrew Garfield just straight up lied about it for a straight year.
Even to his friends.
But yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home, saying it's number 6 on my list is not a slight against it at all, because it easily met my expectations of what it would be, if not exceeded them. So it's certainly worthy of being in the top 10. And I think that you could really make an argument for it being anywhere in the top 10, depending on who you are. But for me, it's number 6.
Excellent. So for me, this was one of the hardest lists I've had to do, probably because I thought there were a number of good to decent